Britain is now experiencing its longest fall in living standards since record began. Real wages have barely grown in over a decade. Economic growth is weaker than most advanced economies. Government debt is hovering near levels not seen since the 1960s. And in 2023, the UK was ranked near the bottom of major economies for growth prospects. Let that sink in. This isn't just a rough patch. This is a deep structural slowdown that's been quietly unfolding for years. But here's the question no one seems to be asking loud enough. Is the UK facing an economic meltdown worse than anyone predicted? Not a dramatic overnight crash like 2008, but something slower, more dangerous, a grinding squeeze on wages, jobs, housing, and opportunity. The kind of crisis that doesn't explode, it slowly tightens. In this video, we're breaking down 10 powerful reasons why Britain's economic situation may be far more serious than headlines suggest, and what it really means for your future. Number 1. Stagnant economic growth. For most countries, economic slowdowns come and go. A bad year is followed by recovery. But in the UK, growth hasn't just slowed, it has flatlined. Since the 2008 financial crisis, Britain's economic growth has been painfully weak compared to its historical average. Before 2008, the UK regularly grew at around 2 to 3% per year. Since then, growth has struggled to reach even half that pace. That difference might sound small, but over time it compounds into something massive. Think of the economy like a car engine. When it's running smoothly, jobs expand, wages rise, businesses invest, and public services improve. But when growth stalls, everything feels tighter. Fewer pay raises, less government spending power, fewer opportunities for young people entering the workforce. Over time, this creates what many economists now call a lost decade, a period where living standards barely move forward. What makes this even more concerning is that other major economies recovered faster. The United States, for example, saw stronger post-pandemic rebounds. Meanwhile, the UK has repeatedly ranked near the bottom among advanced economies for projected growth. That's not just bad luck, it points to deeper structural problems. And here's why this matters to you. When growth is weak, it becomes harder for the country to generate wealth. That means higher taxes, stretched public services, and rising frustration across households. You may be working just as hard, or harder, but the overall pie simply isn't growing fast enough to reward that effort. This isn't a dramatic collapse. It's slower, quieter, but in many ways, that makes it more dangerous. If this breakdown opened your eyes, tell us, how has the economy affected you personally? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We put serious time and research into every video, so if you value content like this, hit subscribe. It's just one click, but it helps us more than you know. Number 2. The productivity crisis. If economic growth is the engine of a country, then productivity is a fuel. And right now, the UK has a serious fuel problem. Productivity simply means how much output workers produce per hour. When productivity rises, businesses earn more, wages increase, and living standards improve. But in Britain, productivity growth has been nearly stagnant for over 15 years. Before the 2008 financial crisis, UK productivity was growing steadily. Since then, it has barely moved. Economists even have a name for it: the productivity puzzle. Compared to countries like the United States and Germany, British workers are producing significantly less per hour. And it's not because people aren't working hard. In fact, many are working longer hours than ever. So what's going wrong? Experts point to several structural issues: low business investment, weak infrastructure, skills gaps, and uncertainty that discourages long-term planning. When companies don't invest in better technology, training, and innovation, workers can't become more efficient. And when workers aren't more efficient, wages struggle to rise. It becomes a frustrating cycle. Here's why this matters to you. Productivity isn't just an economic buzzword. It directly impacts your paycheck. Countries with strong productivity growth see rising incomes and stronger public services. Countries without it, they experience wage stagnation, underfunded systems, and growing economic pressure. Imagine running fast on a treadmill but never actually moving forward. That's what the UK economy has felt like for years: effort without progress. And unless productivity improves, long-term prosperity becomes much harder to achieve. This isn't just a technical issue for economists. It's the foundation of national wealth. And right now, that foundation looks weaker than many predicted. We spend hours researching and breaking this down so you get clear, powerful insights. So tell us, do you feel like you're working harder but getting less in return? Drop your experience below. If you value content that goes deeper than headlines, subscribe now. It's one click for you, but it means everything to this channel. Number 3, the inflation shock. If stagnant growth was a slow burn, inflation was a sudden shockwave. In 2022 and 2023, the UK experienced some of the highest inflation rates in decades, with prices rising at levels many households had never seen before. Energy bills doubled. Grocery prices climbed week after week. Rent surged. For many families, it felt like their money was shrinking in real time. Inflation might sound like a technical term, but its impact is painfully simple. Your pound buys less than it used to. And in the UK, inflation hit harder and lasted longer than in many comparable economies. Energy dependency, supply chain disruptions, and policy missteps all added fuel to the fire. While wages did rise in some sectors, they often failed to keep pace with rising prices, meaning real incomes actually fell. Picture this. You receive a small pay raise, but your electricity bill jumps by hundreds, your weekly shop costs 20% more, and your mortgage rate resets higher. That's not progress, that's pressure. For millions of households, savings were drained just to maintain basic living standards. The deeper problem? Inflation doesn't just hurt spending power, it creates uncertainty. Businesses hesitate to invest. Consumers pull back. The entire economy becomes cautious. And when confidence drops, growth slows even further. This wasn't just a temporary spike. It exposed how vulnerable the UK economy had become to external shocks. And for many people, the cost of living crisis isn't over. It's simply become the new normal. We pour serious effort into researching and simplifying these complex issues for you. So tell us, what price increase shocked you the most? Share your experience below. If this breakdown helped you see the bigger picture, subscribe. It's one simple click, but it fuels everything we do here. Number 4, the housing market time bomb. For years, the UK housing market looked like a success story. Prices kept rising. Homeowners felt wealthier. Property became one of the safest bets in the country. But beneath that steady climb was something far more fragile: cheap debt. And when interest rates surged, that foundation began to crack. During the era of ultra-low interest rates, mortgages were incredibly affordable. Millions of buyers stretched their budgets, confident that borrowing would stay cheap. But when inflation spiked, the Bank of England was forced to raise rates aggressively. Suddenly, mortgage costs soared. Fixed deals expired. Monthly payments jumped by hundreds of pounds. For some households, even more. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The UK property market has been heavily fueled by leverage, not rising incomes. House prices grew much faster than wages for over a decade. That created a dangerous imbalance. First-time buyers struggled to enter the market. Renters faced record high rents. And homeowners became highly sensitive to interest rate changes. Imagine building a tower on borrowed money. Stable while rates are low, unstable when they rise. That's the risk many families are now facing. If rates stay elevated, affordability remains stretched. If unemployment rises, forced sales could increase. And if prices fall significantly, negative equity becomes a real threat. Housing isn't just about property. It's tied to consumer confidence, bank stability, and overall economic health. When the housing market weakens, spending slows. And when spending slows, growth slows further. What once looked like unstoppable momentum now looks more like a time bomb ticking quietly in the background. We put hours of research and effort into breaking this down clearly for you. So tell us, are you renting, buying, or feeling stuck in between? Share your story below. If you appreciate deep, honest analysis like this, subscribe. It's one click for you, but it keeps this channel alive. Number 5, exploding public debt. While households were struggling with rising bills and mortgage costs, another number was quietly climbing in the background: government debt. Over the past decade, and especially after the pandemic, UK public debt has surged to levels not seen since the early 1960s. Today, debt is hovering close to, and at times above, 100% of GDP. That means the country owes roughly as much as it produces in an entire year. Now, borrowing itself isn't always bad. Governments borrow to invest, to support the economy during crises, and to protect jobs. But the real problem begins when borrowing becomes expensive. As interest rates rise, so does the cost of servicing that debt. In fact, the UK is now spending tens of billions each year just paying interest, money that could otherwise go toward healthcare, education, or infrastructure. Think of it like this. Imagine using a large portion of your salary just to pay interest on your credit card. You're not reducing the balance. You're just staying afloat. That's the pressure facing the public finances. And when interest payments rise, governments are left with difficult choices. Raise taxes, cut spending, or borrow even more. For ordinary people, this matters deeply. Higher taxes reduce disposable income. Spending cuts strain public services like the NHS and local councils. And uncertainty around fiscal policy can shake investor confidence, weakening growth even further. This debt isn't an immediate collapse scenario, but it creates a constant squeeze, limiting flexibility when the next crisis hits. And in an already fragile economy, that lack of breathing room could become a serious risk. We invest serious time researching and simplifying these complex issues for you. So tell us, do you think taxes will rise or services will be cut next? Drop your view below. If you value in-depth breakdowns like this, subscribe. It's just one click, but it makes a huge difference to this channel. Number 6. Weak business investment. Behind every strong economy is one critical ingredient: investment. When businesses invest in new technology, infrastructure, research, and expansion, productivity rises, jobs are created, and future growth becomes possible. But in the UK, business investment has been consistently weaker than many comparable advanced economies, and that's a serious warning sign. Since the Brexit referendum in 2016, uncertainty has weighed heavily on long-term planning. Add to that the pandemic shock, inflation surge, and political instability, and many firms have chosen caution over expansion. Instead of building new factories, upgrading systems, or hiring aggressively, companies have held back. And when businesses hesitate, the entire economy slows down. Investment is not just about big corporations. It affects small businesses, startups, and local communities. When confidence drops, fewer risks are taken. Innovation slows. Job creation weakens. Over time, this leads to lower productivity, and we're back in that same cycle of stagnation. Think of investment like planting seeds. You won't see results immediately, but without planting today, there's nothing to harvest tomorrow. Right now, the UK appears to be planting fewer seeds than it should, and that means future growth could remain underwhelming. What makes this more concerning is that other countries are pushing aggressively into green energy, artificial intelligence, advanced manufacturing, and digital infrastructure. If the UK falls behind in these areas, catching up later becomes far more expensive and difficult. Weak investment doesn't make dramatic headlines, but it quietly shapes the next decade of economic performance. And without renewed confidence, Britain's recovery may remain slower than anyone hoped. We dedicate hours to researching and presenting this clearly for you. So tell us, do you feel businesses in the UK are optimistic or holding back? Share your thoughts below. If you appreciate honest, deep analysis like this, subscribe. It's one simple click, but it helps us keep creating. Number 7. Post-Brexit Trade Friction. When the UK officially left the European Union, the promise was greater control and new global trade opportunities. But in reality, the transition introduced something many businesses weren't fully prepared for: friction. And in economics, friction means cost. Before Brexit, UK companies could trade freely across the EU single market with minimal paperwork or border checks. Today, exporters face customs declarations, regulatory checks, and compliance costs that didn't previously exist. For large corporations, this is an inconvenience. For small and medium-sized businesses, it can be overwhelming. Many small exporters have reported delays, additional staffing costs, and lost contracts due to complex rules. Some simply stopped exporting to the EU altogether because it became too expensive or time-consuming. That's not dramatic enough to dominate headlines, but over time, these small withdrawals add up to a significant drag on national trade performance. Trade is vital because it expands markets. When businesses can sell beyond domestic borders, they grow faster, hire more staff, and invest more confidently. When trade becomes harder, growth slows. Since Brexit, UK goods exports have struggled to match the pace of comparable economies. And services, one of Britain's strongest sectors, now face new regulatory barriers in certain areas. Supporters argue that the UK can build new trade relationships globally. And while new agreements have been signed, they haven't yet fully replaced the scale and proximity advantages of the EU market. This isn't about politics, it's about economics. Increased trade friction acts like sand in the gears of growth. And when combined with weak productivity and low investment, it compounds the pressure. We put serious effort into breaking down complex issues without bias. So tell us, has Brexit helped or hurt your industry? Share your honest view below. If you value balanced, in-depth content like this, subscribe. It's one click for you, but it keeps this channel growing. Number 8. Labor shortages. An economy doesn't run on money alone. It runs on people. And right now, the UK is facing a serious workforce squeeze. Labor shortages have become common across key sectors, from healthcare and construction to hospitality and logistics. At the same time, Britain's population is aging rapidly, creating long-term demographic pressure that could slow growth even further. After the pandemic, many workers left the workforce due to early retirement, long-term illness, or lifestyle changes. Add reduced migration flows and tighter labor markets, and the result is clear: fewer available workers for open jobs. When businesses can't fill positions, productivity suffers. Services become stretched. Waiting times increase. Growth slows. An aging population adds another layer of pressure. As more people retire, the working-age population shrinks relative to those who rely on pensions and health care. That means fewer taxpayers supporting higher public spending needs. Over time, this imbalance can strain public finances and limit economic dynamism. Picture this: fewer hands building, caring, creating, and innovating, while demand for services continues to rise. It's not a sudden collapse, but it's a steady tightening of capacity. Employers compete for talent. Wages rise in certain sectors, but output doesn't always keep pace. Long-term, the UK must address skills gaps, invest in training, encourage workforce participation, and adapt to automation. Otherwise, labor shortages could become a permanent feature rather than a temporary disruption. People are the engine of prosperity. And when that engine runs short of fuel, the entire economy feels a slowdown. We spend hours researching and carefully building each breakdown for you. So tell us, are labor shortages affecting your job or industry right now? Comment below. If you appreciate clear, honest analysis, subscribe. It's just one click, but it helps us keep delivering value. Number 9. The pound's instability. Currencies are more than just pieces of paper or digital numbers. They represent confidence. And in recent years, the British pound has experienced moments of serious instability that shook both markets and households. One of the clearest examples came during the 2022 mini-budget crisis, when the pound fell sharply against the US dollar, briefly hitting historic lows. When a currency drops suddenly, it sends a message: investors are uncertain. And that uncertainty carries consequences. A weaker pound makes imports more expensive, from fuel and food to electronics and raw materials. Since the UK imports a large share of its goods, currency weakness feeds directly into inflation. That means higher prices at the checkout and higher costs for businesses. Imagine running a company that depends on imported components. If the pound weakens, your costs rise overnight. You either absorb the hit or pass it on to customers. Either way, pressure builds. For ordinary households, it means holidays abroad cost more, imported products rise in price, and overall purchasing power declines. Currency volatility also affects global investment. International investors prefer stability. If they view the UK as unpredictable, politically or economically, they may demand higher returns or shift capital elsewhere. That makes borrowing more expensive and growth harder to sustain. The pound's fluctuations don't always dominate headlines, but they quietly influence inflation, interest rates, and investor confidence. In a fragile economy, even small currency shocks can have amplified effects. When a nation's currency wobbles, it's rarely just about exchange rates. It's about trust, and restoring that trust takes time. We put serious research and effort into bringing you clear insights like this. So tell us, have you felt the impact of the weaker pound in your daily life? Share your thoughts below. If you value content that connects the dots, subscribe. It's one simple click, but it keeps this channel moving forward. Number 10. Falling living standards. All of these economic pressures, slow growth, weak productivity, inflation, debt, labor shortages, lead to one unavoidable outcome: falling living standards. And this is where the crisis becomes personal. Because while GDP and bond markets matter, what truly defines an economy is how people actually live. Over the past decade, real wages in the UK, meaning wages adjusted for inflation, have barely grown. In fact, by some measures, Britain has experienced the longest period of stagnant real income growth since the 19th century. Let that sink in. Despite technological progress in modern industries, many households feel no better off than they did years ago. You might recognize the signs: working full-time but struggling to save, cutting back on small luxuries that once felt normal, delaying major life decisions, buying a home, starting a family, launching a business, because financial security feels uncertain. That's not just an economic trend. That's a shift in national confidence. Living standards aren't only about income. They reflect public services, healthcare access, housing affordability, and overall opportunity. When growth slows and debt rises, governments have less room to improve these areas. The result? A sense that progress is stalled. This is what makes the situation feel heavier than a typical recession. It's not a sharp crash followed by rapid recovery. It's a prolonged squeeze, a gradual erosion of momentum. And when people begin to feel that hard work no longer guarantees improvement, frustration builds. That's the real meltdown, not dramatic headlines, but a steady decline in everyday economic optimism. We genuinely pour hours of research and effort into every single video to bring you honest, in-depth analysis. So tell us, do you feel better off than you did 5 years ago? Why or why not? Comment below. If you appreciate content that goes beyond the surface, subscribe. It's just one click for you, but it means everything to us. So when you step back and connect all the dots, stagnant growth, weak productivity, soaring inflation, housing pressure, rising debt, weak investment, trade friction, labor shortages, currency instability, and falling living standards, a clear pattern begins to emerge. This isn't a dramatic overnight crash like 2008. It's something quieter, slower, and in many ways, more dangerous. The UK isn't collapsing, but it is underperforming. And when an advanced economy underperformed for over a decade, the damage compounds. Opportunities shrink. Public services strain. Confidence weakens. People begin to question whether hard work still leads to progress. What makes this moment so critical is that many of these problems are structural. They won't disappear on their own. Productivity must improve. Investment must return. Trade relationships must stabilize. Public finances must become sustainable. Without real reform and long-term strategy, the country risks drifting into a prolonged period of economic stagnation. But here's the important part: awareness creates power. Understanding what's happening allows individuals and businesses to adapt. Whether that means building new skills, diversifying income streams, managing debt carefully, or investing more strategically, preparation matters. Economic cycles always change. History shows that nations can recover, rebuild, and reinvent themselves. The question is not whether challenges exist. They clearly do. The real question is whether the right decisions will be made before the slow squeeze becomes permanent. And that's why conversations like this matter. Because the true economic story isn't in the headlines. It's in the long-term direction.